with observational research designs as a group, and then going on to experimental, so under the heading of quantitative research designs. So this is the first one. Just in advance, I'm going to be talking in this video about the first one, which is case series research. After that, there is a video which is not given by me. It's one that you'll see below on case control and cohort research, and then I'm going to be back with the video on experimental research design. So I'm not doing every single one of them, but that will become clear to you as you look further down the page. So again, just to repeat, what I'm starting with now falls under the heading of quantitative research designs. We have previously covered what quantitative research is, so you should have a good understanding of that. And within that heading of quantitative, there are two different groups. So the first one is observational research designs, and the second one is experimental research designs. So we're going to start with observational, and the first type of research that we're going to be talking about in terms of research design is case series. Just to backtrack a little bit, what I mean by observational research is research where research participants are not placed into groups by the researcher, and there's no manipulation of variables. So in other words, I'm going to talk about experiments later on, but I'm just going to refer to them briefly here. When you perform an experiment, the researcher will take patients or participants and intentionally put them in one group or another group to study some kind of difference between the groups. In an observational research design, that doesn't happen. In an observational research design, the patients effectively put themselves into groups by virtue of the risks that they're exposed to or the outcomes, which might be diseases, for example, that they have. Those are things that happen naturally. And so the researcher just observes what happens. So it's important to understand that in observational research designs, the researcher isn't manipulating anything, isn't taking a group of patients and saying you go in that group or you go in that group. They're just basically studying the participants or the patients as they naturally occur, and from that trying to deduce certain things about either risk for diseases usually, or the actual diseases themselves. So that's why it's called observational. Research is just observing what happens. So the first type, and that is really the focus of this video, is a type of research called a case series. And as you can see from the slide, it's the lowest level, it's the simplest type of observational research design, and it's effectively just a description of a group of patients which have something in common. So in other words, you might have 20 or 30 or whatever number of patients who have a particular disease or disorder, and the aim is very simple. It's just to describe those patients. So how many of them there were, what was the difference in gender, for example, or the distribution across different groups of gender, what was the average age of the participants or the age range, what were their presenting symptoms, what were their outcomes. There's a whole lot of things you could look at, but the aim is just to describe. These things are usually done over a relatively short period of time, and what I mean by longitudinal studies is that they start at a point in time and they look at every consecutive patient over a period of time, and then the study stops. So it runs longitudinally over time. Importantly, there isn't, in a case series, there isn't any attempt to compare those patients or participants to any other group. Okay, so there's no control group, there's no comparative group normally. It's purely just descriptive. So we're just saying here's a bunch of patients, they have a particular disorder or disease in common, and we're just describing it. There's also no hypotheses, and there's no involved statistical analysis. It's usually just very basic descriptive statistics like numbers, percentages, etc. So really, really simple stuff. So you might be thinking, if this kind of research is so simple and really elementary, then why would you bother doing it? And that's a good question. The case series research fits into a particular kind of reason for wanting to do research. And that is when very little is known about a particular disease or disorder. So you wouldn't do case series research where a lot is known about a disease. I mean, just to take an example, HIV/AIDS. There's been a lot of research in the area of HIV and AIDS. A lot is known about the disease. And so at this stage now, to say that you wanted to do a case series on that would not make sense, because we know the basic facts about AIDS. A lot of it has been described already. So we would not be learning anything new by going and doing a case series now on a group of patients with AIDS, unless there was something very specific about it that wasn't known. So it might be a particular, maybe a new strain of HIV that causes a particular disease expression, and nothing had previously been done or written or researched about that. Then there might be a reason to do it. But if a lot is already known, if there are a lot of basic facts that are known about a disease or a disorder, then there isn't a reason to do a case series study on that. So case series is really where either there's a new disease, something that was previously undescribed, or simply a disease that's been, or a disorder that's been out there for quite a long time, but that just hasn't been researched. Then it makes sense to say, let's start, before we do more involved research, let's just start by understanding the basic facts about this thing. You know, how often does it affect males? How often does it affect females? What is the age distribution of people who get this disease or disorder? So it's really just to try and establish those basic facts without going any further. So it's the lowest level of observational study. What often happens once case series studies are done is that other researchers will come along and do more complicated research that uses the data in the case series. So for example, the next step up from a case series might be the next thing that we're going to talk about in this learning unit, and that might be a case control study or cohort study or something like that. So a case series really forms the basic kind of bedrock of scientific investigation of disease processes or disorders. I hope that has helped you to understand case series. There's a lot of information available out there on case series research, different video clips, and in textbooks as well. You can go and have a look at that stuff, and it will add to your understanding. I've just put up two examples here of case series that just to illustrate what they might be about. This first one was should be familiar to you, maybe. It was a study done in our department about RSI, and so effectively, prior to the study being done, what was happening with RSI done by students in this country was unknown. So nothing about it was known. We didn't know how often it was happening. We didn't know what the outcomes were, what the success rates were with intubation, what kind of induction agents were being used, what kind of neuromuscular blockers were being used, what sort of patients were getting RSI. Was it mostly trauma, non-trauma, etc.? So this study was done. It was a case series, and its aim was just to describe what's going on with pre-hospital RSI done by students at UJ, as an example of a cohort of South African students. So that's an example of why you would use a case series, and it wouldn't make sense to do this study again. This study has established a number of basic facts about students doing pre-hospital RSI, and anybody wanting to do further research in this area would want to go and do more complex research that looks at other questions. But the basic facts have been established by this study. This is another one, just to give you another different example. This is a study on echocardiography in a large group of cardiac surgical patients, and the interesting focus of this case series is on safety. So they wanted to know, the researchers who did the study wanted to know, what is the kind of safety profile of this intervention, echocardiography, in patients who are going in for cardiac surgery? You know, does it lead to a lot of side effects, a lot of complications, etc.? And that was the only aim. So that is really just descriptive. They took these 7,200 cardiac surgical patients who all got echocardiography, and they purely just looked at how often complications and side effects happened. So in 5% of cases this happened, 2% of cases that happened, and they just left it there. That was the only aim of the study. And so that's another interesting application of case series, is that it can be used to describe specific things, like in this case the safety profile of an intervention. But often case series are broader than that. They take quite a broad look at a particular thing. Like the RSI example, it wasn't focused just on success, intubation success or side effects. It was focused very, very broadly on just general things about students doing pre-hospital RSI. So those are just two quick examples. You can find many, many more if you go onto Medline or even onto Google Scholar and you use the key expression case series. You'll find a lot of other research like this that has been done. So that's the end of this video. The next one is on case control studies and cohort studies. That is a video by somebody else. It's not by me. You can have a look at that. And after that, we will go on to experimental research designs.